Looking. Bogdanovich, 3 seconds. Bogey for the win! Bogdanovich!
Pack them up and send them home, Grand Napear.
If you don't like that, you don't like Kings basketball. Oh, boy!
Hey, salute everybody. How's everybody doing? So we got a dandy today. Excited about the interview today. We got the voice of the Kings, ex-voice of the Kings, a guy I've known, talked to, very straight shooter, known for epic calls. Grant Napear. He's in the back, so I'm going to bring him on now. I do ask that the chat, you guys respect the interview. No vulgar messages, respect the guests. I hope you guys enjoy the show. He's going to give insight. He's an open book. And so enjoy it. Here he is.
Great to have you. Grant? You know what? The guy with the blower comes right behind us as we're starting the interview. Hey, first of all, it's so awesome to reconnect with you, man. I used to love talking with you on my radio show. We used to have some amazing conversations, They were phenomenal conversations.
They were classic, Grant. I mean, I would call in. You would get on me. Everything I talked about was Houston Rockets. Grant, for the people that think I'm not a real Rockets fan, do you know any other Rockets fan in Sacramento that is probably bigger than me? No. Honestly,
no, I really don't. You're the only Rockets fan I know in Sacramento, and you used to call the show all the time talking about the Rockets. It was fun. But we had some really good conversations. You know that?
Yeah, awesome, man. So let's get to it, man. I mean, how you been? I mean, how's life?
Well, yeah. I mean, my life is different now, obviously, than it was when I lived here in Sacramento. I spend, most of my time in South Florida. I come back here because I have a lot of friends here. My oldest son is here, and he actually works for the Kings. And so, I'm here a lot, but, I make my home in Florida.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we definitely miss you here, man. I mean, I miss your radio calls. I missed the pregame, postgame. I do see that you and Jerry still do it.
Yep.
I mean, I follow you on YouTube, so that's amazing. Scott Pollard. I mean, us here in Sacramento are worried. We're concerned. It's big news here. He's an ex-Kings player, fan favorite. Can you touch on that a little bit and kind of give a little insight on what's going on with Scott right now?
Yeah, I message him every day. As a matter of fact, about 15 minutes ago, he and I were just texting. He's in the intensive care unit in Vanderbilt Hospital in Nashville, Tennessee, and he's awaiting on a heart transplant. And, I think we're all praying for him. No male figure has ever lived past 55 in his family. And he is hoping and praying that he gets a new heart soon. Now, I don't have to explain to people the dynamic of this is can be quite mentally exhausting / difficult, because the only way you get a heart is if somebody passes away. So the dynamic of what it takes to keep you alive means that, on the other side, there's a family that's grieving. And so this is a very difficult situation to be in. And Scott, being such a large person, needs a heart from a bigger human, which limits the amount of donors that could possibly, give Scott a new life. But he's a good spirit. I'm going to hopefully see him soon and give him a hug and tell him how much I love him and how much people are rooting for him. He's been overwhelmed in a very positive way by the outpouring of support. I mean, it's meant a lot to him and his wife, Dawn. But we keep our fingers crossed, that he's able to get a heart. But again, the dynamic of this, the only way you get a heart is if somebody passes away. And so it's, from a mental aspect, and I've talked about this with Scott, it's a lot to digest. It really is.
No, for sure. So I'm glad that he's in good spirits. He's positive, and salute to you, Grant, because, I know that you're a friend of his and you're showing support. So that's awesome. I mean, I think he needs all the support he can get. So we're praying, we're hoping, and we hope for a great outcome.
Yeah, thank you.
No worries, man. No worries. So Grant, okay, so let's get to the topic, right? I mean, a lot of people in Sacramento were shocked, surprised when you resigned from the Sacramento Kings over a tweet, right? Boogie tweets you, you tweet something back. Personally, I thought it was bad timing. I think we both agree. We talked about it yesterday a little bit, right? How it's probably bad timing, but you know, all lives do matter. Can you give a quick summary of what happened?
Sure.
What led up to it? Was there something personal between you and Boogie that was going on? I mean, why would he just tweet you out of nowhere? I mean, it seemed kind of awkward to me, but go ahead. I'll let you.
You'd have to ask Demarcus that. I don't know why he tweeted me. I had not talked with him in several years. I think the last conversation I had with him was when he was in Sacramento before he got traded to New Orleans. So, you know, that had been several years. You know, a lot of people make a big deal out of the fact that I responded to Demarcus Cousins. I would have responded to you. I would have responded to my brother. I would have responded to my son if they put a tweet out and asking me the same thing. I would have responded the same way I did with All Lives Matter, every single one. And, you know, quite frankly, I am blessed to travel. I still am blessed to travel. I've met a lot of phenomenal people in South Florida, many of whom are people of color. We have had this conversation with all of my friends in South Florida, and I'm not exaggerating. 95% of my friends in South Florida are people of color. They're either Black, they're African American, they're from Panama, they're from Caribbean islands. And it's interesting because I've asked every single one of them how they feel about All Lives Matter, every single one. And there's only been one person that had a problem with it. Nobody else has had a problem with it. Also, it's interesting that in the United States of America, and maybe you will disagree with me, anytime a person that's white, Asian, Hispanic sees a person that's Black, they refer to him as African American. Well, I have a lot of friends in South Florida who do not want to be referred to as African American because they're not African American. I have two very, very good friends from Panama. Both are a podiatrist in Fort Lauderdale. And I asked them the very question. I go, no, we're Latin. We're not African American. And so these are the type of conversations we're having. But we've gotten in depth about All Lives Matter and every single one. And here's the reality. All Lives Matter could not be a factual statement if the lives of Black people didn't matter. So do I believe that the lives of Black people matter? Well, of course I do. I mean, of course I do. Nobody wanted to spend a minute and look at all of the tweets that I had in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd, leading up from May 25th until I made my tweet on Sunday evening, May 31st. I had many posts on social media supporting the outrage, supporting the protest, supporting how we need to stop this and that police brutality and everything else. I was 100% in support of that. All you have to do is go look at my timeline. But I put All Lives Matter, every single one, and all of a sudden I'm a racist. Really? Like, you know, I mean, I don't even know what else to say. So I would have responded that way to anybody. I believe All Lives Matter, every single one. Speaking of George Floyd, what did his brother say right after the sentencing of Derek Chauvin when he was convicted for murder? George Floyd's brother came out onto the steps of the courthouse and he said, hey, we need to remember that all lives matter. So George Floyd's brother can say all lives matter, but Grant Napear can't. What kind of country are we living in?
Yeah, Grant, so when you tweeted that back, it was 2 days when you resigned. I mean, did they give you a chance to, I mean, so was it like they asked you to resign or you resigned on your own, or how did that go down?
Yeah, I resigned. Well, I was fired from KHTK, Bonneville International, based out of Salt Lake City, who, by the way, used me as a sacrificial lamb to show Black Lives Matter, hey, we're on your side. But yet, if you go to Bonneville International and you look up their leadership page, which is easy to do, I encourage everyone, when you have a moment, Google Bonneville International Leadership and go look at their leadership board. Every single person for Bonneville International, based in Salt Lake City, owned by the Mormon Church, are either a Caucasian male or a Caucasian female. Every single one. They don't have one person of color on their entire board, but yet they're firing me over All Lives Matter. I can't really get into my situation with what happened with the Kings, but I resigned on my own volition, and that's pretty much all I can say on that.
I got you, man. I totally respect that. And
Yeah.
I want to let the people know too that, when Grant was here in Sacramento, you had a foundation
I
where
sure did.
you sent kids to college. You had yearly golf tournaments.
Yeah.
Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, it was one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done in my life. I was brought up in a family where my dad was a civil rights activist, and my dad always preached on doing things for the less fortunate, and that when you ever have an opportunity, then you need to use that opportunity to make your community better. My brother, for example, was a double major at one of the best colleges in New York, Union College, majored in both math and economics, and graduated from that fine college with a 4.0 student. He could have worked anywhere, could have made an incredible amount of money. He decided to teach math at Freeport High School on Long Island, which is a low-income neighborhood where 90% of the students were Hispanic and Black. And that's what my brother did for 35 years because he wanted to make a difference. And he felt that by, working with young people at that age, he could make a difference. So Joe Namath, not the former New York Jets quarterback, but a gentleman named Joe Namath approached me about doing a golf tournament. And we sat down and we thought that we would do an educational foundation. And it was called the Future Foundation of Sacramento. And it began in the early 2000s. And I had a golf tournament annually that raised the money to send our students to college. All of our students, over 100 of them, okay? First generation college students. No one in their family's ever gone to college before, okay? Most of the students in my foundation were minorities. Most of my students were Black, Hispanic, Asian. We had some white people in our foundation too. Personally, I hate putting people in groups because I don't believe people should be put in groups, but I'm doing it for sake of conversation. So I put 100 plus students through college. Okay. Not only do we put them through college, we mentor them beginning in 10th grade. Okay. And all of the high schools in the greater Sacramento area are familiar with our foundation. They all help the students in their applications and the process and all the paperwork to be able to get into our foundation and the students that we select. So again, I want to go back and say that it's the most rewarding thing I've ever done to be able to give a student an olive branch. One of the great stories was the valedictorian of Grant High School. And she spoke at our golf tournament several years ago. She graduated from Grant High School with the highest honors ever. She's the best student in the history of Grant High School. And our foundation put students through a 5-year state-funded education. Well, she ended up going to Stanford, and our foundation helped her get grants. Plus, with the money that we allocated towards state fees, we were able to get her a full ride to Stanford. And those are the success stories that I love. And she gave the most eloquent, amazing speech that when she was entering 9th or 10th grade, and I can't remember exactly when, that she was really lost. And when she heard about the Future Foundation, it was like an olive branch, something of hope that she was able to grab onto. And I will tell you, when we interviewed our students, we would narrow down hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications to 16 students. And then we would have them come and interview with us. And Sac State was great. They would always give us a big room to interview our students. And they would come with whoever was raising them. In some cases, it was a mom and a dad. Some cases, it was a grandma, grandpa, or an aunt or an uncle. Many of our students came from broken families. Many of our students, you had to have a certain economic threshold that you were below. And they were amazing. And I mean this, and I'm being as brutally honest as I can. We would be sitting there in tears, all of us on the board, in tears, listening to their stories. And we wish we could have taken all of them, but we couldn't. But again, between May 31st, when I put All Lives Matter, every single one, and June 2nd, nobody wanted to spend 2 minutes and look at Grant Napier's past and go, no, wait a minute. Has this ever been an issue in the past? No. Wait a minute. What does he do for his community? All right. What have I done for the community? Well, I'll tell you what I've done for the community. And I say this to most people. The people that criticize Grant Napear, I say, okay, you don't like me, fine. I'm okay with that. I was abrasive on the radio. You and I had a lot of spats, but it was all in good nature. It's not like I didn't like you or anything. But the point is, people would listen to me on the radio and think I'm a bad guy. Well, that's the way that goes. There are people out there that think Stephen A. Smith is a bad guy. There are people out there that think that Chris Russo's a bad guy. I mean, I can go on and on. I'm okay with that. Okay, but here's what I'm not okay with. I'm not okay with being criticized. And then when I turn around and ask that individual who's criticizing me, what have you done to make your community better? And I'm met with silence. So I believe actions speak louder than words. Okay. I know that I made a difference in the lives of over 100 at-need, underprivileged students in Sacramento. And I can tell you for a fact that it made a difference in their families and the pride that their families had to finally have an individual go to college for the first time. So you want to talk about all the things I've ever done in my life, and I've been blessed to do a lot of great things. That's at the very, very top of my list. And I'm grateful that I was able to give back to the community. It's meant the world to me.
That's amazing, Grant. I'm glad that you have a chance to share that and kind of give people insight on that. Last point on this conversation. Charles Barkley called you, didn't have your phone number. Did that shock you when you pick up the phone and it was Sir Charles? Give me your thoughts, and don't go too deep into the conversation, but I mean, can you just paraphrase what that was?
It touched me like you cannot believe. And he said, I just got back from New Orleans spending 2 days with Drew Brees. I don't know if you remember, but right after I put All Lives Matter, every single one, Drew Brees came under immense scrutiny because he said he believed standing for the national anthem with his hand on his heart. And he got killed by a lot of the black teammates on his team. And Charles said to me, he goes, yeah, I was just with Drew Brees for 2 days. And I was trying to help him navigate through this. And we talked for, I don't know, 15 minutes. And then that was in June. And I decided to start a podcast in October. And I reached out to Charles and I said, it would be an honor to have you on as my first guest on my podcast. And he said, I'll do whatever you need me to do. And I said, okay, let's do it. And he was the first guest on my podcast. Meant the world to me.
That's great, man. That's great. So Grant, so let's get to some of the fun stuff, man. The 2002 Kings, Peja, Mike, Vladi, Chris, Gerald, Hito, Bobby, a friend of mine. Talk about it, man. I mean, back in those days, they trade Mitch, you bring in Chris, you trade Jason, you bring in Mike.
Yeah.
You kind of go through the growing pains a little bit. 2000, you get swept. 2001, tough series. But that year when the Kings finally broke through, and, people don't understand the old Arco Arena in Natomas here in Sacramento. You talk about the Lions' Den, right? I mean, cowbells. I mean, so just, before we get to the Kings and Lakers, just talk about that team. How they, they were on the cover of Sports Illustrated.
Yeah.
They were a fan favorite around the whole league. They
were the darlings. They were the darlings of the NBA. Everybody was talking about the Kings. We sold out every single arena that we went to. It was the toughest ticket in the NBA to get was when the Sacramento Kings were coming to town. Think about that for a minute. Okay. The Kings were the toughest ticket in the NBA. We would pull up in front of the arena. There would be people out there waiting for us, and everyone wanted the autographs of the players. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. And the Kings were the best team in the NBA that year, but they missed 14 free throws in Game 7. And then, of course, the officiating in Game 6. But, what Arco Arena, for those that are too young to have experienced or remember, there was nothing like it in the league. Players loved playing at Arco, both on the Kings and opponents. Opponents used to love coming into Sacramento because it reminded them of their college atmosphere. So that was great. And I'll tell you what else was dynamite about that team. They genuinely liked each other. They hung out together. They joked together. They laughed together. You'd be after shoot around at a hotel restaurant, and you'd have 8 or 9 guys sitting around, having brunch together before they took their afternoon nap, before they went back to the arena. I mean, it was a very close-knit bunch of players.
That team came so close, I'm not a Kings fan whatsoever. I think everybody knows that by now. But Grant, I was at Game 5, right? Chris, they inbound. Chris sets the screen. Mike comes off. I mean, one of the most iconic moments in Sacramento Kings history. You lose Game 4 on an epic Robert Horry shot. The Samaki Walker halftime 3 shouldn't have counted, right? Shouldn't have counted. We win. If they win that game, they go up 3-1. Game 6 is the game that we all point to, right? We all point to. I've heard some of your statements, some of your thoughts on Game 6. How in the hell does the Lakers shoot 25 plus free throws in the fourth quarter? You foul out Vladi, you foul out Chris.
Yeah.
Speaking of Scott, I think Scott was guarding Shaq in the fourth quarter. If I'm not mistaken. You know what I'm saying? He tried to do the best he can. Kobe elbows Mike Bibby. Just
Yeah.
I remember going to Game 7, and when that game was over, Grant, and that game went to overtime.
Yeah.
I've never seen the city that quiet. I've never seen the city, that upset because we were so close. And when you're that close and you don't get it, it just does something to you. And
Well,
it's
it still stays with all the players. I mean, it's 2024, and they'll take that to their grave. I mean, they had, despite what happened in Game 6, despite the Robert Horry shot, and I was blessed to be announcing that game on radio. But you take that to your grave, and you can say all you want about the Game 6 officiating. We've been over it, and we get it. But you know what? You missed 14 free throws in a Game 7 on your home floor. You can't do that.
I remember Peja, Doug Christie had open threes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Peja or Doug was nursing a sore ankle. I could be wrong there.
Doug wasn't ready for the moment. He wet his pants. Yeah. He admitted that when I was working with him. We talked about that, and he said I wasn't ready for it. Like in other words, the moment was too big for him. And
Grant, that's what separates the guys, the men from the boys. And those moments, when it becomes the moment. That's how we look at guys like, a MJ, a Kobe, like Tim Duncan, guys like that.
Yep.
Okay. So speaking of that then, because I want to get into Kobe Bryant a little bit.
Yep.
He's my favorite player of all time. Right.
Yep.
I remember you and Doug were calling a game in Minnesota at the Target Center. I think it was a while, and you guys touched on it, and you can see the emotions oozing out from you guys. Talk about a moment, interaction, his greatness when he steps on the court. I remember, Grant, when he was going through his Denver stuff, right? I went to a game here in Sac, and the Kings fans were brutal, right? They were just absolutely brutal pregame. He comes out, gets his shots up, right?
I remember.
This kid never looked our way. He never even twitched, can care less, right? It was him in the basket. Talk about Kobe Bryant, talk about his place in history, and just talk about his greatness.
No opponent has ever done more damage to the Sacramento Kings than Kobe Bryant. Not Michael, not LeBron, not Magic, not Kareem, not Larry, not Isaiah. Nobody, not Shaq, has done more damage to the hearts of Kings fans than Kobe Bryant. And I announced every single one of them. He was the one guy that you did not want to see with the ball in his hands with the game on the line. And I had the most respect for him. And I'll share a story with you. The last game that Kobe ever played in Sacramento, Kobe always came early, and I was on the floor doing my radio show, as I always do, hours before the game. And the arena was empty except for the media that were waiting to watch Kobe. And as you well know, to get to the visitors' locker room at Arco, you had to walk across the court. So I'm doing my radio show, and all of a sudden I see all the media move to the tunnel where Kobe's coming out. And Kobe starts walking along the baseline to the sideline. And he's starting to walk where he would be coming right in front of me. And I'm doing my show live. And he walks in front of me, and I go, Kobe. And he turns, and I said, Kobe, I just want to let you know we're live. I always tell people, always, if I catch them off guard and I call their name out, I always go, hey, we're live. Because I never want them to have to, you know what I mean? I don't want them to ever have to apologize for saying anything. And he stopped, and I said to him, I go, hey, I just want to thank you and tell you how much I have respected and been honored to call so many of your games. And then we have a picture. Somebody took a picture, and I still have it. I have it on my phone right now. I'll put it up in front of the screen if you want. And to this day, he looked me straight in the eye. Okay, it was almost like respect to respect. He knew who I was. I had talked to him before, but it's not like he didn't know who I was. And he knew I went through all those battles. He knew I was announcer through all the games and all, I mean, listen, don't jump on me, everyone, for saying this, but I was Sacramento's Chick Hearn. All right. I mean, I'm not Chick Hearn, but
absolutely.
Okay. So Kobe knew that. And the eye contact, I'm going to put it up in front of the camera here. The eye contact that we shared with the handshake, and it was only about a 5-second exchange, but I'll never forget the eye contact and the firm handshake and him looking right at me and saying, "Thank you very much. I really appreciate that." That's the last time I ever interacted with Kobe Bryant. And let me see if I can bring this up here if you don't mind. All right.
Oh, no, of course.
All right. So can you see that okay?
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And look at those old Arco seats.
Yeah. It was
Wow.
Bollywood night. But look at that. See, we were looking right at each other. And I'm
Right.
so happy. I'm so happy that I have that photograph, because there's no player in my 32 years of announcing Kings basketball that gave me more heartache and more pain than Kobe Bryant. But I've always made this practice. I did the same thing to Dwayne Wade. I did it to Dirk Nowitzki. All the great players, when they came into Sacramento for the last time, I would always walk up to them. I remember when Dwayne Wade played his last game and he was warming up across from me to in front of the visitors' bench. It's about 10 minutes before the horn went off. And I put my mic down and I walked over and I go, "Dwayne." And he stopped and I said, "Hey, man, I just want to thank you and just tell you how much I've appreciated being involved in the league and watching you play and announcing some of your games, man. I had the utmost respect for you." And I told him that. And again, I think the players really appreciate that. Dirk, I got a great story about Dirk Nowitzki. Dirk is stretching on the baseline, okay? He's sitting down on the baseline hour and a half before the game, stretching. He's getting ready to go through his warm-ups. And I walk over and I go, "Dirk," I go, "Man, I just want," and he goes, he gets up, so it's, he got up, he's sitting down Indian style, and he actually gets up and stands, and he's looking at me. And I said, "Hey, man, I just had to come over and tell you how much I respect you and what a privilege it's been to watch you play all these years and announce so many of our great games that we had in the early 2000s. And he said, "Man, I really appreciate that. I can't tell you how much that means to me." And he goes, "And I wish you the best." But you know what I mean? Like, I really cherished those interactions with the greats of the NBA, because I've always thought this: we're all one league. The refs, the announcers, the players. Like, when you really think about it, all of us are responsible for the league moving forward. And I've always felt that we need to work as a team, even the people that beat you every night, like Kobe Bryant. The reality is Kobe was great for the league, and he was great for Sacramento. I mean, when I say that, think about the rivalries. Think about you and all the games that you would want to go to. Yeah, you wanted to see Shaq, but you also wanted to see Kobe. And that's the beauty of sports. We all want to see greatness, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
When you're, you've been to hundreds of games. When you're in the presence of greatness, like I was blessed to announce a National Hockey League game that Wayne Gretzky was playing in at the Great Western Forum. I did the Sharks game on TV, and Wayne Gretzky was playing. And I'm just sitting there announcing this game, and I'm like, wow, that's freaking Wayne Gretzky. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm a sports fan. I'm like you. I'm like everyone else. Yeah, I do this for a living, but I love watching the greats too, just like everyone else.
Grant, I remember in like, I was probably 17, 18. I was working, wasn't getting paid much or nothing. And this was when MJ played for the Wizards. And I spent my whole check to go see him play.
Yeah.
And he was nursing sore knees, and he was questionable for the game, right? He played a half. And I remember, and I remember normally I would go use the bathroom, get up and go do my thing. But in this particular game, Grant, I was focused on him.
Yep.
He went to the bench. My eyes followed him.
Yep.
It didn't seem real. You know what I'm saying? Only Kobe Bryant gave me that type of feeling. Real quick. So you started announcing games in 88, right? 1988. Okay.
First game ever at the Arco Arena.
So you've seen Magic, you've seen Kareem, you've seen MJ, Clyde, Hakeem, Charles, David, Carl Stockton, Carl, John, all the greats. I mean, what an honor, man. I mean, so you've seen the game played a certain way, you've seen it transition, and then you've seen it even transition even more into what it is now. Michael Jordan, obviously, I think he's the best ever. A lot of people do. His tenacity, his killer instinct, his will to win against all odds. Any stories, memories, moments? I mean,
well, yeah. going to Chicago Stadium before they moved into the new United Center. It was the only time in my 32 years, and it's the only time during the year where I would take my headset off and take in the starting lineups by Ray Clay, the public address announcer of the Bulls. The energy in that building was unlike anything I've ever experienced, including Arco Arena. And watching Michael play, but announcing the games, you just said something very interesting about when Michael played, you wouldn't go to the bathroom or go get something to eat or drink.
Yeah.
When I used to announce the Bulls games, you were on, and I mean this, you were on the edge of your seat, and you were concentrating even more than at any other point during the season, because you knew that there would not only be one great moment in the game, there would be several, okay? And that you were going to see greatness, but you didn't know whether it was going to happen in the first minute, the 6th minute, but you knew it was going to happen, and it was going to happen more than once. Watching him play and watching him go against Mitch Richmond, who to this day, Michael said was his most difficult opponent. Mitch and Michael had some epic showdowns, and I loved announcing those. I loved them.
Yeah, I'm glad you said Mitch, because the Kings, I was at a game, granted, they just gave him a jacket and, did the thing with him recently here, and they caught Mitch the Rock, right? He was physically imposing.
Oh, boy.
And MJ said it. He says, Mitch was my toughest matchup. They would go back at each other. Those are definitely some great battles. Grant, one of my best moments of you calling a game was when you were at Oracle and Clay goes for 37 in the quarter.
Boy. Yeah.
Talk about that, man. I mean, probably the best, the best thing, the greatest thing that I've ever seen. It was amazing to be there and not only watch it, but to announce it. And it's something I will never forget. I've done a lot of great things. I've been, the 35-point comeback in Chicago in the middle of the third quarter where the Kings won. But I've never seen anything like Klay Thompson. And I will tell you, that will never be broken again. There will never be a player in the NBA that scores 37 points in one quarter. Most players that play in the NBA don't even have 37 as a career high in all their years, okay? He had it in 12 minutes. I mean, that's remarkable. So we talked about yesterday on the phone a little bit, where I remember seeing you and Jerry, on that final call.
Yeah.
And for those who don't live here locally in Sacramento, the Kings are close to going to Seattle. I mean, it was happening, right?
Yeah, it was happening.
Yeah, it was happening.
They had a signed deal.
Yeah, Kevin Johnson, some other great people here in the city, on that city council. You and Jerry had a very emotional sign-off that day. Because I remember watching you guys' games, Grant, and after each game, you guys would do like a final say-so after every game.
Yeah.
And this one was different because it was the unknown, right? We didn't know what was going to happen in the future. Talk about that time. What's your thoughts? Like, are you moving? Because let's face it, if they move, you're probably moving too, right? I mean,
I don't know. We never broached that. I would tell you this: I had both my boys in the car going to the game with me early because I had to do my radio show. And I remember driving through the parking lot into my parking space thinking, gosh, is this the last time my boys are ever going to watch the Kings play in this building? Is this going to be the last NBA game I never announce in my life? And I kind of knew that it would be difficult to do the game, but I really got a sense of how difficult it was going to be when in the afternoon, in between one of the commercial breaks on my radio show, Channel 13 asked if they could interview me real quick. And I said, yeah. And I almost broke down on the interview. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you got to get your act together here. But I also had seen the rollout to Tesla and Love Song. And I knew what was to come at the end of the game. And you can still go and check it out on YouTube. It's one of the most amazing 5 or 6 minutes of video I've ever seen of anything involving the Sacramento Kings. And, at the end of the game, when they came back to us and I started talking and the fans started chanting in unison, Grant and Jerry, Grant and Jerry. And then I looked over at Jerry and he was getting kind of teary-eyed. And I'm like, oh boy. And at that point, I'll tell you what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, get off the air, do your job, and get to the rollout. The rollout being Love Song by Tesla. And I'm like, that's my job right now. You have to be able to do that. And so we did that. And what's very interesting, the 30 for 30 down in the valley, which was never aired on ESPN, but many of us in the community have seen it. Jason Hare is the producer or the director of that. He also was the director of The Last Dance. And he said that one of the driving forces of doing the 30 for 30 documentary on the Kings was Jerry and I breaking down on TV. And I didn't know this, but at the time, Kevin Johnson, our mayor at the time, was en route from the game to the airport because the Board of Governors meeting was the next day. And he talked about that in front of the Board of Governors about, geez, wait a minute, our announcers are breaking down on the air. Everyone's crying, you know, like that was all part of the deal. I had no idea at the time, but I think, I don't know, I don't like to talk about this and rank it, but I've got a lot of people that tell me that they think that when you look at the history of the Sacramento Kings, like of just things, that's in the top 5. People always talk about that. They talk about it to me all the time, more so than the Ori shot, although that's in the top 5. But they always talk to me about that final, what we thought was the final game, and us breaking down. I get more people wanting to talk to me about that than anything I did in 32 years.
Yeah, I actually remember that moment like it was yesterday, and it was just because we all were, you know, we didn't know what was going to happen with this team. You know, I'm not a Kings fan, but I enjoy basketball.
Sure.
You know, I enjoy you guys calling games. Grant, road trips, cities, restaurants, you know, plane rides. You know, I know you can't share too much of details about certain things, but talk about your favorite cities, you know, your favorite stadiums, arenas, you know, do you have the like friends that you still talk to who are broadcasters? I mean, all that you have it.
Well, I'm from New York and I grew up in New York. So going to Madison Square Garden was the biggest thrill annually. And the first time I ever did a game at Madison Square Garden in 1988, you know, to have my dad with me on the court and my brother and my aunt and my idol who I grew up and I became an announcer because of Marv Albert, to be sitting literally 4, you know, I'm looking down maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 seats to my left. Marv Albert's announcing the same game that I'm announcing. Like I can't even really put into words what that night was like. But I used to love, obviously, doing the Knicks at Madison Square Garden. The energy, there's nothing really like it. But every time the schedule came out, I looked at 3 things. I looked, when were we in New York? Do we have a night off? And when were we in Chicago? Okay. Because I always wanted to go to I'm a huge hockey fan, as you can see. I always used to want to go watch the Blackhawks play at Chicago Stadium. And I always used to love it when we had a night off in Chicago because the Blackhawks very often were playing the night before. And there was really nothing quite like going to a Blackhawks game at the old Chicago Stadium. And then I looked to see when we were in Miami because it was so great to be able to go to Miami in the middle of winter. And very often we'd be coming in from Cleveland or Milwaukee or Detroit, and you get on the plane where it's 10 below and you land and it's 80 degrees. And there's just, Miami is unbelievable. It's a phenomenal city. It's just like a wow. Like you hated to get on the airplane. I always remember every year we used to walk up the steps of the airplane. And sometimes we'd be going from Miami to Milwaukee or Miami to New York or Miami to, you know, whatever, a cold, and you'd be like, oh my God, no. When we land, it's going to be freaking 10 below zero. You know, it sucked, you know, but those are some of my favorite cities to go to in terms of ambiance, weather. But New York, number 1 for sure. Michael Jordan in Chicago, number 2. Just being in South Florida, Miami, 3rd. Obviously, listen, there was nothing quite like going to the Great Western Forum when Magic, Worthy, Kareem, Coop, Byron Scott, you know, Chick Hearn, who, I mean, what can you say about Chick Hearn? I mean,
right,
Chick, not only was he a great announcer, he was a great human being. And he taught me a lot. Like I learned a lot from Chick. You know, I don't really share this very often, but I learned a lot. And I learned a lot by watching him. And I learned a lot the first time I was ever at the Great Western Forum. You know, I'm basically a kid. And I got there early. I was so excited. I got there early. I think I got there at like 4 o'clock for a 7:30 game. And Chick was already there at his broadcast position. And It was the only arena in the league where we didn't announce the games on the floor. We announced upstairs. And all of a sudden, Chick walked over to me. And he says, "Hey, how are you? I'm Chick Hearn." I said, "Mr. Hearn." He goes, "No, call me Chick." I go, "Chick, my name's Grant Napear." He goes, "Yeah, I've heard about you. I just want to welcome you to Los Angeles. I want to welcome you into the NBA. And if there's anything that you need, you speak up. We want you to be comfortable here." And I was just like, wow. I'm like,
That's great.
that's Chick Hearn. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then the last interview I ever did with Chick before he passed away, we were sitting at Arco Arena, and I'm interviewing Chick courtside, probably about 5:45, 5:50. And I go, "Chick, you know what? Thank you very much. It's such a great honor to talk to you all the time. And I can't thank you enough for your time." And he goes, "Grant, wait a minute. I want to say something." And he said, it just blew me away. He said, "I hope the people of Sacramento realize how lucky they are to have you as their announcer." And I just thought, this is the classiest man. And then I thought to myself, Chick probably does this everywhere he goes, because Chick was about building up people. Chick wanted to make you feel good. You know what I mean? And there aren't a lot of people that can do that. And I bet you if Chick did an interview in Dallas with Chuck Cooperstein, he might have told Chuck the same thing. But it didn't matter. The fact is that Chick wanted you to feel good, and he would put you on a pedestal, and he didn't have to do that. And I just I love the man. I absolutely love being in the presence of Chick Hearn.
Yeah, that's amazing, Grant. I mean, I think one of the most iconic phrases that you're known for is, if you don't like that, you don't like NBA basketball.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Because I mean, I hear commercials now where your voice is in the background and you can still hear that phrase. I mean, I think that's a classic call. Do you remember the first time you said that? And probably not, but where's that?
I want to say it was sometime in the early 90s, and it just came out. It just happened. It was spontaneous, and it caught on. And one of the great stories that I remember about that phrase is when my son went to college down at San Diego, and he called me up and he goes, "Dad, you're not going to believe this." I go, "What's that?" He goes, "I met my roommates and, my new friends, and they always ask where I'm from and, what's your dad do?" And I told them who you were. And they said, "Oh, if you don't like that, you don't like NBA basketball." Kids in San Diego were saying, and I was just like, oh my God, it caught on and it kept on catching on. ESPN would always use it. They put it on the NBA promos. It was it was a great sign of respect for me. Like, I was like, wow, it's pretty cool, but it just happened. You
also had the one where you said, "Turn the sprinkler system on, leave on fire."
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah. I miss those days. Yeah. I miss those days.
So, I mean, being a play-by-play NBA announcer, I mean, that's always been a dream of mine. I mean, that's where my passion comes from. That's what I always wanted to do. Obviously, I'm not doing that. But how do you balance personal life with that travel? Because it's a major commitment, right?
Yeah, it's hard. You miss family. You miss a lot of family stuff. I think my wife's birthday, I was gone every single year on her birthday. Jerry Reynolds, I can't tell you, I would think probably almost every year we would have to wish, his wife a happy anniversary, because their anniversary is December 23rd, and we had a game every single year on December 23rd. So I always remember Jerry wishing his wife a happy anniversary. But you miss a lot of if you have a family, you miss a lot of your kids' games.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That's not easy. But there are our military men and women, right, and the sacrifices that they make. And there are a lot of people that make sacrifices with their families for whatever the reason is. And I had a great career, great life, great memories, great friends, a dream job. And so I never, ever complained about being on the road. But yeah, it is a balance. You better believe it. And here's the other part of the balance that a lot of people don't understand. And I firmly believe this is why the first game back after a long road trip is so hard. And I think that's another reason why the Kings lost to the Pistons recently. Fans don't understand this. When you come back after being gone for 7 days, 10 days, 12 days, 14 days, your loved ones want to see you. and your family wants to see you and your kids want to see you and you're excited to see them. So you might get home from a road trip at 3 a.m. from New York, Philadelphia, Miami, Boston, had to stop and refuel. By the time you get your bags, get in the car and drive home, you get at 3. Well, guess who's coming in to wake you up at 6 a.m. or 6:30? The kids are jumping on your bed because they want to see daddy, right? And then you're up with your kids all day and you're exhausted. And then you have a game the next day. And you're not mentally ready to play that game because you've been with your kids and you've been with your wife. And, now there's the honey-do list, okay? And that does happen. And then all of a sudden you wake up the next day and you're like, oh, my God, it's game day, and you're not ready for it. And I really believe that's one of the reasons why teams struggle so much on the first game back from long road trips. And fans, I don't think really quite understand that.
Yeah, they don't, Grant. They don't. And I appreciate you sharing that insight.
Yeah.
We'll close out here. Probably, if you don't mind, give me like another 5-10 minutes, and then we're
No
good.
problem, buddy. Happy to do it for you.
The Kings, the current Kings roster. I'm a season ticket holder, so I'm at all the games, that I can attend.
Uh-huh.
They've been, they've been okay to me. I think their defense needs to get better. I think that Sabonis, just my opinion, Grant, he's too predictable, and he leads the league in rebounding, right? He should have been all-star for sure. I'm not sure how that didn't happen.
I don't understand.
You must reward the man. This is crazy.
Yeah.
But in the Western Conference, Joker, Looney, some of these AD, some of these bigger guys, Grant, they tend to bully him in the paint like Looney did last year, and he needs to get a right hand. Like, Sabonis is too predictable in the paint with the left hand, and I think teams bigs can game plan for that.
I haven't seen too many players stop him, so they might be able to game plan him for him. But have you seen too many players stop Demarcus Sabonis this year?
Not during the season. No.
He leads the league in double doubles. I think he leads the league in triple doubles. He leads the league in rebounding.
Yeah.
And so I understand the point you're making, but here I'm going to look at it the other way. Without Sabonis, the Kings would not even be close to a 500 team.
Totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah. Were you surprised that there weren't no moves made at the trade deadline for this team?
Yes and no. I don't know what was out there that could have been had. I really felt that the Kings needed to solidify their bench. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer here, but I'm not really that high on the Kings this year. I don't think they're going to win a playoff series. And I personally don't think they're going to be a top 6 seed. I think they're going to have to be in the play-in tournament. And the reason why I say that are a couple of reasons. Number one is their point differential. They have the worst point differential of the top 8 teams in the West. It's just it's like 0.4 or 0.3, or it's in that. That's terrible for a team with a record as good as theirs. They allow the most points of any team in the playoffs in the West right now. They're too wildly inconsistent. How can you go and beat Minnesota in Minnesota and then lose to Charlotte at home and lose to Detroit at home and lose to Portland at home? And here's the other deal. How many blowout losses have they been involved in? They've been beat badly. Just look at the last 2 weeks. They got destroyed by Cleveland, right? They got destroyed by Oklahoma City. Detroit beat them up badly. There are too many bad losses. And so this is how I look at the Kings. They are who they are. Are they a good team? Yeah, they're a good team. No question they're a good team. Are they a very good team? No, they're not. Can they beat you on nights when they don't make threes? No. Can they beat you with defense? No. Can they beat you with toughness? No. How else are they going to beat you on nights when the ball's not falling from downtown? They can't. Here's something else. They're a terrible free throw shooting team. That's going to bite them. That's going to bite them as we move on in this season.
Absolutely. Yeah. Grant, shocking. Like, I've never seen Darren miss so many free throws.
Unbelievable.
And like fourth quarter, game on the line, high pressure moment free throws. Is there any team that stands out right now in the West that you say that's the team?
I got to tell you, I think the Clippers are the team. And I would never say that with the James Harden team, and he's got to prove it to me in the playoffs. But they look pretty good. I got to tell you, they look pretty good. But I don't ever count out Denver when they're healthy.
Yes.
You're still going to have to beat Jamal Murray and Joker. And then I think Minnesota and Oklahoma City are for real. They're no flukes. I think those are your top 4 teams in the West right now. And Phoenix is coming on. They're going to be interesting. The question to me is, are the Kings going to be able to grab 6th, or is it going to be New Orleans? See, to me, here are the 3 teams that are going to be fighting for 5 and 6. New Orleans, Dallas, and Sacramento. That's how I'm looking at it.
Right.
And
I'm glad you mentioned.
only two of those teams are going to get in. The other team's going to have to go to the play-in tournament.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned Minnesota because to me, they're very interesting.
Yes.
They're tall, they're lengthy, they defend, they rebound, they have a stud in Edwards, they have a point guard who's been there, done that, right? Yeah. If Cat can give you something consistently, right, they could throw multiple defenders at a Kawhi, and Minnesota has beat the Clippers a few times this year.
Yeah, they have.
And let's face it, it's been kind of easy,
Well, the league. You know the league as well as anyone. The league is all about matchups.
Yes.
And the Kings don't match up well with Minnesota. they don't. They don't.
So Grant, let's close out on one final question. It's a question that I ask everybody.
Yeah.
Because I want to get your thoughts. You've been around, you've seen it all. So I think your opinion is valued on this particular question. Do you entertain top 5 players ever? Do you entertain the best of all time? I mean, if I give you my top 5, can you give me yours and explain why it's your top 5? If that's okay.
I can try, but go ahead. Give me your top 5.
So my top 5: Michael, Kareem, Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan, Magic.
You don't have LeBron in the top 5?
I don't. He lost 6. He lost 6 finals. I can't put him there, Grant.
Oh God, come on. I don't think you can have this conversation if LeBron's not in your top 5. You don't have to have him 1, 2, 3, or 4, but he's in your top 5. There's no way LeBron James is not one of the top 5 players of all time. I'm sorry.
Who would you take out of my top 5 to put him there?
I put him over Tim Duncan. I love Tim Duncan, but I'd put LeBron in there over Duncan. I know Duncan's got 5 rings, but if you're asking me if I was starting a basketball team today, who are your other 4? You had Kareem?
I had Michael, Kareem, Kobe, and Magic. And Tim.
Yeah, I mean, LeBron's got to be one of your top 5 players. That's where you and I disagree a little bit.
You got Kobe in your top 5?
Yeah, but he would be 5th probably. I don't spend a lot of time on this like you do. I agree on Kareem's got to be on there. I got Magic on there, right? Michael's on there. So those are 3 automatic. Would you agree those are automatics? Those 3, Kareem.
Yeah.
And Michael, right?
Correct.
All right. So now, okay. A lot of people think Will Chamberlain ought to be on that top 5. I talk to people all the time that think Will Chamberlain's one of the great 5 players of all time.
Yeah, I mean, we differ on the LeBron James thing, but we won't get into it because I'm very passionate about that, and I can explain why, but it's okay.
I mean, Tom Brady's lost a number of Super Bowls, but is he the best quarterback of all time? Are you going to say no because he's lost Super Bowls?
No, I'm not going to say that, but I think football for quarterbacks are different because the defense plays a role in winning losses, whereas basketball, I can affect both sides of the court. And I've seen LeBron James have too many meltdowns in the biggest moments to where these guys I've named ahead of him haven't had those meltdowns on that level. That's just me. I mean,
I know Jerry Reynolds. Jerry Reynolds thinks LeBron James is the greatest player of all time. So I'm just giving you a.
Oh, he does?
Thinks he's the greatest player in the history of the game. Yep.
Oh, Jerry.
Yep. So, it's subjective. It will, there's no.
Yeah.
And the reason why Jerry says that, and he says the same thing about Magic, he said LeBron could be an all-star at all 5 positions on the floor. And he said the only other player that he can say that about is Magic Johnson. That Magic could have been an all-star center or an all-star point guard. And the same is true for LeBron. He could be an all-star anywhere on the floor.
Yeah, I don't believe that, but I mean,
I do.
I mean, if he was an all-star at the 4 or 5, then he would have guarded Dirk Nowitzki in 2011. I mean, this guy, Grant, he's great. Listen, the man's amazing, right? My family's from Northeast Ohio, Sandusky, Cedar Point, right there.
Oh yeah, I went to college at Bowling Green.
Yeah, so I mean, I know. I mean, he's great, but I can't discount the failures and the moments. We talked about a Kobe and MJ when he became. Listen, they may have lost some games, Grant, right? But you never said they lost because of them. And so that's my only contentions with the LeBron James thing, man. But Grant, it's been a pleasure, man.
Thank you.
Mean, I'm glad you've come on and you shared some time with me a little bit.
Pleasure.
You've been an open book. I'm glad you shared your story. Hopefully people have a different perception. I never looked at you any type of different way over this whole fiasco.
It's a good word for it.
By
the way, can I just say one other thing for the people?
Of course.
I have a lawsuit that is ongoing in federal court where I'm suing Bonneville International So I'm really hoping that I get my day in court. We'll find that out in a couple of months. And if the judge rules that this is going to now continue on the trial, my trial will be in November. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And I'll be keeping everybody up to date on that.
And so before we head out of here, Grant, just talk about what you're doing nowadays, where people can check out your podcast, some of the guests that you'll be having on, give your Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube.
Yeah, thank you. I'm on YouTube. If you don't like that with Grant Napear, you can go to my website, grantnapear.com, or ifyoudon'tlikethat.com. All of my work is there. I do a podcast. I also do shows on every Kings game. Jerry Reynolds joins me at halftime for every game with Ryan in Sacktown. And then Jerry Reynolds joins me every week for an hour or so. And then Sean Salisbury, former quarterback of USC, the Vikings, ESPN. He and I do a football show every Monday on my YouTube channel, if you don't like that. And then on Twitter, at Grant Napear Show. But, again, I really appreciate all the support in our community. I love being back in Sacramento just to talk to all the fans. I mean, you know this, you live here. They're freaking people here are awesome.
Yeah. So Grant, maybe when you're back in Sacramento, we can link up and lunch, dinner.
Awesome.
Chat some more, man. We'll definitely stay in touch, man.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate you.
Yes, sir, man. Have an awesome day, man. And send Scott Pollard our best wishes, and we're praying for him.
I will.
All right. Thank you, Grant. No problem. No problem. Well, there you have it. Mr. Grant Napear himself, ex-Kings long broadcaster. I mean, I think a lot of people have their thoughts on him. A lot of people, have their perception on him, over the tweet, I never looked at it in a different type of way. He talked about how he was supporting the George Floyd thing, weeks prior to the tweet, so listen, he's a friend of mine. I've known Grant for a long time, right? We go way back. He's a good man, right? He's the Chick Hearn of Sacramento. He's a voice of the Sacramento Kings. Us here in Sacramento, we know who he is, and so check him out. He still does podcasts. He does Kings pre and post games. But yeah, great interview, man. Great interview. I want to really get his insight on some of the King stuff and moments. And you guys heard it. He talked about Kobe. He saw Magic, Kareem. I mean, the guy has been the announcer since 1988. And so his opinion is greatly valued. He's been around. He's been there. He's done that. He's hosted the Jim Rome Show. So we'll get him on again. We'll get him on again. He's still doing his thing. And so we wish him the best. But, thanks to all you guys who tuned in, watched. Hope you guys enjoyed the interview. His son still works for the Sacramento Kings. So, but yeah, so I'm going to end the stream now. So yeah, man, thanks to all you guys, and have a good day.